Insulin resistance is something that's come up a few times. Let's go
Yeah.
into greater detail on what that is and why somebody might have it and not even know.
Yeah. So first of all, what it is, right? Uh, when we eat carbohydrates primarily, uh, our insulin levels are going to go up. And the reason we mentioned it earlier is you eat the carbohydrate, gets converted to glucose, to sugar. That sugar goes in our bloodstream, and our body knows that too much sugar in the bloodstream is toxic. So we don't want to let it hang around. And insulin is the primary hormone that gets the sugar out of our bloodstream. And the way that it gets the sugar out of our bloodstream is either we're burning the sugar immediately for energy, or we're putting the sugar into storage. And we have what's a short-term storage system. It's called glycogen. That can go in the liver and that can go in our muscle. And then we have the long-term storage, which is fat, body fat. And, so that goes into our fat cells. Now, if you're eating too much carbohydrate and you're eating carbohydrate too often, your insulin level is going to remain elevated. And the cells, right, the fat cells, the liver cells, the muscle cells, right, that are taking in all of this sugar, they're going to get full. They're going to say, can't take in any more sugar. And they're going to stop listening to the insulin, essentially. And that's what insulin resistance is. And the body's initial reaction to that is, okay, well, we're just going to make more insulin and, kind of force these cells to listen. And that might work for a while, but then it's going to stop working. And finally, what's going to happen is your blood sugar level is going to remain elevated, right? And that's where most doctors pick up on the problem. All of a sudden, you're diagnosed with diabetes. And the problem is they've missed the long period of time, often decades, that the insulin was high. The body was becoming more and more insulin resistant. And during all that time, there's damage being done. There's damage being done to your blood vessels. There's damage being done to your other organs. And it's a huge missed opportunity because if we just do a very simple test, look at the insulin level, look at what's called a fasting insulin level. You haven't eaten for 8 to 12 hours. How much insulin is in your bloodstream? And if it's a lot, and I consider anything in double digits to be a lot when you're looking at the test results, it tells you you're on your way to you're insulin resistant or you're on your way to insulin resistance, and we got to do something to reverse that.
As a heart surgeon, talk more to that piece about high insulin and damaging blood vessels.
Yeah, so it turns out that insulin resistance is the primary driver of heart disease. We can go back to some studies done primarily by Dr. Joseph Kraft, 1970s, 1980s. And he was one of the, leading uh, clinicians and scientists looking at insulin resistance. And one of the things he did was he looked at all the patients that came into his hospital with heart disease, with heart attacks. And he screened them rigorously for insulin resistance. And what he found was 90 to 95% of them were insulin resistant. So heart disease is insulin resistance primarily. Now, you contrast that against what we've been told more recently is the cause of heart disease, cholesterol, right? And you look at those statistics, the patients that come into the hospital with a heart attack, how many of them have high cholesterol? And it turns out that's like a 50-50 shot, right? Maybe half of them have high cholesterol versus, like I said, 90 to 95% that have insulin resistance. So which ones should we be focusing more on? Insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is the root cause of heart disease. And I believe our path forward, if we're going to have meaningful impact on heart disease, is let's attack the insulin resistance. And that's really been the primary thing that I have been doing with patients now to try and manage and prevent their heart disease. And we are seeing great results from it.
Let's get into the mechanism there.
Mhm.
Somebody with circulating high blood glucose, high insulin, how does that cause plaque in the vessels?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different pathways, right, that connect the insulin resistance to the plaque and the damage in the blood vessels. So the first one is the sugar problem, right? Sugar is directly toxic, directly damaging to the lining of our blood vessels. And so, as you're becoming insulin resistant and you're not controlling your blood sugar level as well, and you're starting to get these spikes in your blood sugar, every time you eat, that's going to directly damage the blood vessel wall. And that's the first step in the plaque formation process. Now, insulin resistance does a couple of other things that magnify that problem. Insulin resistance lowers the production of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a essential chemical that our body uses to help protect our blood vessels. Nitric oxide helps lower our blood pressure, does lots of things, but it protects the lining of our blood vessels from damage. And when you get lower levels of nitric oxide, you're now more prone to damage to the blood vessels. And it turns out that insulin blocks one of the enzymes that our body uses to produce nitric oxide, and therefore insulin lowers nitric oxide levels. The third important way that we start to connect insulin resistance and plaque is that insulin resistance actually alters the types of cholesterol that we have in our body, right? And this gets into the discussion around um, cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, right? And we've all been told, and you've heard it from your family doctor, you've heard it from your cardiologist, that LDL cholesterol is bad cholesterol. It is harmful. It turns out that that is only partially true, because LDL cholesterol isn't one thing. LDL cholesterol is actually a family of what we call lipoproteins, particles that transport cholesterol around in our bloodstream. And broadly speaking, there are two types of LDL cholesterol particles. There are what we call small, dense particles, and there are what we call large, buoyant or large, fluffy particles, you'll hear them called. And those are very different things, because the small, dense particles, these do get involved in plaque formation. They are what we call atherogenic particles, meaning that they promote the formation of atherosclerosis, the plaque in the arteries. But the large particles, the large buoyant particles, are non-atherogenic. They don't get involved in plaque. So, insulin resistance, one of the effects of it is that it causes more of those small, damaging, atherogenic particles and less of the large, healthy, non-atherogenic particles. And that is a third way that insulin resistance ends up contributing to plaque formation. So those are probably the three big ones. There actually might be even a few more that we can point to. Insulin itself, the high level of insulin itself, some studies have suggested is also toxic to the endothelium, the blood vessel wall. That is why we see such a strong connection between insulin resistance and heart disease.
You hear this term too, oxidized LDL. Is
Mhm.
that tied to the small and dense?
It is tied to it. It's not quite the same thing, but there is sort of a linkage there. And oxidized LDL is another form, essentially, of dysfunctional LDL. So, um, small, dense particles are more likely to become oxidized, is really the connection there. But it's a different type of damage that's being done to those LDL particles. And again, the problem becomes now. So we're going to take another step back and we're going to say, well, you know, why why does cholesterol exist in our bodies, right? What is its purpose? And one of the purposes of cholesterol in our bodies is it is a repair mechanism. So when we get damage to the blood vessel wall, cholesterol is sent there to repair the damage. And what's supposed to happen when you have the large, buoyant cholesterol particles, right? They repair the damage to the wall, they get sort of reabsorbed and they disappear. And there's nothing left behind. You have a nice new, wall. The small dense particles and the oxidized particles, when they go to the blood vessel wall and they're trying to repair the damage, but because they themselves are dysfunctional and damaged, the body reacts negatively. And now this small dense LDL particle that was there to try and fix the damage, it ends up magnifying the damage. It sets off its own inflammatory reaction, and you get things like macrophages that come in, which are cells that, are now trying to get rid of the small dense particles, and everything becomes kind of inflamed and it becomes this vicious cycle. And that's what is ultimately causing the plaque to build up.
Since you made it to the end of this clip, I know you're going to love the full episode. Click here to watch. I'll see you over there.
Early on in my career as a heart surgeon, I learned there was a link between oral health and heart health. People that have periodontal disease, those people are at higher risk of having